Going to be episode 1 of the Kingdom First podcast. So we're going to do episode 1 today. I'm just going to get into it. This is going to be the origin story of everything that everything is founded upon. I will take some Q&A at the end, but we are going to be jumping right in. And the question is why Kingdom First? Why does identity matter? So I'm going to walk you guys through a timeline of my life of how I've arrived to this point. And we're going to go all the way back. I'd go all the way back to when I was a young kid. And from the time that I was an infant till 5 years old, I was blind. I couldn't see. And I used to sit in front of this massive TV when I was a young kid. And, we didn't think anything of it. And honestly, I didn't know any different because that was the only life that I had lived up until that point. I remember specifically being in kindergarten, and I would keep sitting close to the board, and I would tell my teacher, I'm like, I can't see anything. I can't see anything. And she was honestly thinking I was playing a joke on her. I remember her having a conversation with my parents, and throughout all this time, still nobody picked up on anything. But here I am as a young kid just walking around thinking that my life is normal when in all reality I can't see. And we're playing pickup baseball out in the front yard, and my oldest brother, who is about 10 years older than me, he hit a line drive. I remember vividly, I was holding my glove up, and the ball went right over my glove and hit me in the nose. And I was very good at baseball. God had blessed me with that. So my parents at that point was wow, something's wrong. There wasn't anything wrong with sitting in front of the TV. There wasn't anything wrong with not being able to see the board in kindergarten. But the fact that my nose got broken, we went to the hospital, the doctors instantly your son can't see 5 feet in front of him. He's legally blind. I can't remember the exact eyesight I have, but it's terrible. It's something over 400 and something. To the point today, I have to get a note from my eye doctor to pass my driver's license eyesight test. So they take me to the eye doctor, and I have to get seeing correction for the first time. Now, keep in mind, guys, for 5 years of my life, I really haven't saw myself. And I remember the first time getting glasses and seeing myself, I absolutely hated every single inch of me. Every single inch. I looked in the mirror. I had these big, round, chubby cheeks. I hated the way my hair looked. And it was this overwhelming sensation of shame that I didn't even know existed. I didn't know what shame was at the time because I was a young kid. I remember riding home from the eye doctor with my head literally in the door panel in my mom's car, just crying, just bawling my eyes out. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? I can't believe this is me. That was really what it was. I cannot believe this is me. And I think it's really important to point out about this story, guys, is I didn't have social media. A lot of people struggle with that today, and they look at other people and compare themselves. I had nothing to compare myself to. I just went from not being able to see to being able to see, and I hated me. And I mean a deep, deep hate. And this was the first place, guys, where I found my first identity. This was the first place where I actually worshiped the first God of my life. And that first God was athletics. My entire life, I struggled with anxiety. My entire life, I struggled with nervousness, to the point I used to skip school because my stomach would get so upset because I didn't want to go to school as a young kid. And the only thing that solved that in my life was playing sports. It was sports was this performance-based thing that no matter how I looked, no matter how I felt about myself, none of that stuff mattered, but I could go perform and get rewarded, right? I could work harder and get rewarded. I was talented. I could put the work in. And this was the very thing that gave me peace from the time I was 5 years old all the way to 17. All the way to 17 years old. So that was the God of my life, and that's what I worship, because it was the very thing and the only thing in my life that truly gave me peace. It was the only thing. You put me in a football helmet, you put me on a basketball court, you put me on a baseball field, the world disappeared. The absolute world disappeared. None of my problems mattered, right? As soon as the game was over, I went back to hating myself. And I quite literally lived in shame for a majority of my life, but sports was the thing that kept me grounded. We're going to fast forward to about 4th grade, and my best friend was killed in a freak car accident, and I had just saw him. We just left Story Spinners. I just got out of a motocross accident, so I wasn't able to participate. And we got home that night, and I remember my mom waking me up saying Wesley was killed in a car accident. And I just remember as a young kid just yelling at her, I was calling her a liar, essentially. I just couldn't believe it. It was there's no way. I just saw him 15 minutes ago, And I just remember just freaking out, I couldn't handle it. And all these adults around me were telling me God has a plan. And I vividly remember screaming, I hate God and his plan is stupid. So that was the very first thing that I said about God was I hate him and he's stupid because of this incident. And I want to let everybody here know, if you're an adult and a young kid loses their best friend, the absolute worst thing you can go tell them is God has a plan. Like, that is a terrible idea. Terrible. As a young kid, like, it's even hard for us to understand God as an adult, guys. Think about a young child, right? And that was the very thing that planted this atheistic seed in my life from that day forward. And keep in mind, at this point, I'm worshiping sports as my God. All right, so I'm worshiping sports as my God, and now this God that everybody's talking about, I hate him. Fast forward a little bit, I went on with the normal steps and processes and, got saved, got baptized, not because I knew who Christ was. That had nothing to do with it. I went and did that because that's what the adults around me told me to do. It was that simple. We started going to church as a family. I say a family, my dad didn't really go, but my mom started making us go to church as we got a little bit older, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, we started to resent it. And in church, I looked up to, professional athletes, guys. Like, I was a young kid that just loved sports. Remember, sports were my God. And as a young man who looked up to professional athletes in my church, I looked around and I was judging all the men at a young age. There wasn't a single role model in that church that I would want to model my life over. There wasn't a single godly man inside those walls. Every single person walked around and looked like they hated their life. They didn't look like they loved their jobs. They had no joy. There was no fire coming out of their voice. There was no conviction. They didn't have strong bodies. And I'm like, man, if this is God, like, if this is what godly people operate like, I don't want nothing to do with that. This is the voice in my head at 10, 11, 12 years old, guys, right? There was no godly role model. Probably about a year later, me and my brother are playing Yu-Gi-Oh cards in the church, and like on the floor right by the pews. And the pastor at the time walked by us and said, that's for devil worshipers. And me and my brothers didn't say anything, but like, once again, as a young kid, I'm like, what? I'm playing a card game with my brother, and you just walked by and said that we're worshiping the devil. And that was like the final straw for me at that age. Between not having any godly men in front of me and then that comment from the preacher, I checked out. I was like, this is all a joke. I was like, nobody represents God in this world. We have preachers walking around saying this, and I'm giving you guys my internal dialogue as a young kid, right? And I was judging God on all the people that were in my life because I didn't know God. I didn't know Christ. I had been saved and baptized. I had no clue what that meant. I was forced to go to church. I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but that was just where I was at in life. And after the Yu-Gi-Oh card comment, I was just like, this is a joke. Like, if this is God's people, I want nothing to do with it. This is all a joke. And then I remember me and my brother like rebelling going to church. And then we just kind of formulated our own opinions. It was like, all this God stuff is made up. This is at 12 years old, right? This is all a joke. You guys are all weak. The reason you guys say you need to believe in a God is because you're scared. That was what a 12-year-old and a 13-year-old formulated in their head from their experiences in life up to this point, right? Because I didn't understand or know Christ, which some of you guys listening today, if you hear me talk about living out Christian values, this is why. To reach that young boy that didn't have that role model. We'll fast forward a little bit. I'm still worshiping and serving sports. And I'm still saying there's no God, that God is not real, right? At the age of 14, I started having sex. That was the first time I had sex was the age of 14. I had no clue what I was even doing, right? That same age, that's when I got blackout drunk for the first time, 14 years old. So drunk, I did not drink again for about 2 years because it was the worst hangover in my entire life. For any of my people around my age, there was these things called Four Locos, and it was like the OG Four Locos was like energy drinks and alcohol all combined in one. And dude, were they strong. I drank 2.5 of those as a 14-year-old kid because my oldest brother was throwing this raging party at our house while my dad was working third shift. And this raging party, there were some individuals there for some reason that were some pretty big drug lords. And I mean big, like not like, slinging a little couple bags here and there. I mean like big time, all right? I didn't know this at the time, but as I got older, this was exposed to me. So that was my story up until 14. 15, you start smoking a little bit of weed. I was playing sports still worshiping sports. I was on the way to pregame meal as a freshman for a varsity baseball game, and I was in the back of the truck with the juniors and seniors, okay? And we're heading to pregame meal, and they lit something up. I didn't even really know what it was, but it was a blunt. And I was in the back seat, and they're like, you want to hit this? I didn't realize this, but they were getting high before the baseball games, right? People that I looked up to, right, as a young athlete, great athletes, And the first time I was like, and it passed around again. They asked me again, and I'm just like, dude, you got to. You know what I mean? You got to. You're the young kid here. Everybody else is doing it, They didn't necessarily pressure me, but they kind of kept asking, and, you just fall victim to that stuff. And that was really the first time I got high, and it was before a baseball game, before something I truly loved. And then that kept sprinkling in my life, from 15 to 16, we get our driver's license, we start partying even more. And I found myself playing sports throughout the week. And on the weekends, I partied literally all weekend. Like I did not sleep. We started taking Adderall, smoking weed, smoking cigarettes, drinking alcohol, powder came into play, mushrooms, acid. I'm going to be full, just blunt here of all the things that I've done, okay? Because this is important to the entire ministry and the entire calling that God has on my life. I was escaping my life at this point, guys. The things I was serving at this age was sports still was my God. I still got peace from there. Hey, and then I found this other thing that when I wasn't playing sports, guess what? It gave me peace too. So I was just escaping my entire reality, right? Escaping my entire reality. I want to add in, guys, up until this point, I was an A honor roll student. I was in advanced classes. Like God has blessed me with some stuff in life, right? Like I was very good at a lot of things, but I couldn't handle life. It was like I just couldn't regulate myself, and I felt like I always needed to escape. It was like I couldn't handle this, and it all started from the first time I saw myself. At 16 years old, I was playing varsity football, and I ended up breaking a bone in my spine. And, I had to go to the hospital, had to be carried off the field, and, I was put out of sports essentially. And that was when things really took a negative turn, because my God that I then worshiped for, 11, 12 years was gone. I couldn't play sports anymore. And I had this little bit of hope that the next baseball season coming around, I was going to be able to play baseball again. I couldn't play basketball. I was out football for the season. And baseball came around, and I was like warming up for, I say tryouts lightly. We were having tryouts. And the coach pulled me to the side. I just finished throwing, warm-ups. And he said, hey, I need to see the doctor's note from your doctor to release you to play baseball. Like I hadn't thought anything of this. And I called the doctor's office literally on the baseball field. I pull my phone out, call him, and he's like, no, you can't play. And in this moment, I didn't try to argue with this doctor. I took it for truth. As soon as he said that, I emotionally reacted, and I just lost it. I started cussing. I was cussing at the coach like it was his fault. I got all my, and I was like, are you effing serious? I can't play baseball, right? He's like, you can. I'm sorry. There's nothing I can do for you. I didn't call the doctor back. It was like in my brain, that was my ticket out. As much as I didn't want that, it was like that was my ticket out. As I reflect back on that story now, it's like, man, why didn't you challenge any of that? Like you just wanted out. I don't know. It was a weird thing as I reflect back now, but in the moment, I didn't know how to react. Get my baseball stuff, get in my car, spin tires leaving, cussing, crying, just a basket case the whole way home. Because literally, guys, this was my God. Baseball, any of you guys that can relate to this, you'll know what I'm talking about. Baseball was my first love. Like baseball was the thing that I fell in love with at a very, very young age. And I didn't think I would ever lose that. Like it was the best thing in my entire life. I played travel year round during other sports. I'd get out of school, we'd drive an hour, I'd go to practice, we played weekend tournaments everywhere. Like it was my life, my absolute life. And it was something that I was lucky to be good at, So when that was ripped away from me, that was like not only my God in my life, but also like my lover, and it's just gone. And I go home and I tell my parents, I'm yelling at my parents essentially, like, yo, I effing quit school. I'm not going back. I can't play baseball anymore. And they didn't even argue with me because I was so upset. Like I was so mad. It was like, I think they were just looking at me like, wow, I don't even really know what to say. And then to couple that, guys, nobody in my family graduated. My dad got kicked out at 9th grade. My brother dropped out. My oldest brother got expelled. So I was just kind of following the footsteps, man. I was the last one. I was the youngest one. And, it was just that's just what we do. We just quit school or get kicked out of school, even though I was on a decent trajectory at one point. So when that God was ripped away, guys, let's continue this identity conversation. Sports are gone. 17 years old, sports are gone. I'm pretty much broke living at my parents' home. And you remember those people from the parties when I was 14 years old? Well, we had access to all those guys, And that's when I went really, really downhill. That's when it wasn't just casually smoking. It was, doing whatever we could to take pills, doing whatever we could to put whatever substance we could up our nose, mushrooms, acid. I mean, it didn't matter. It was like just whatever we could get our hands on. And then we just drank alcohol to like accelerate it, and for no other reason than just escape, and that became my God. Drugs became my God, because that same peace that I got from baseball, the same peace I got from football, the same peace I got from basketball was now gone. And now I found it in these substances, and not a specific one. I didn't care what it was. I was like, I just want to feel good. I mean, that's really the core of it. And I also wasn't confident in myself, because most of my life I lived in shame. I had this shameful just being of myself for so long. And at 18 years old, my dad told me, as a loving father always should, hey son, you either go to school or you go get a job, or I'm kicking you out of the house. I'm not giving you any money, right? And I was like, okay, can I get a job, Dad? My dad doesn't know this, so when he listens to this, he's probably going to be like, dear Lord. He got me a job at the place he was supposed to work out, and honestly, I got high the day before. I had a drug test. I took the drug test, and I put water in the toilet, and somehow it passed. I have no idea. Don't ask me how. I don't know how that worked. I guess it was by the grace of God. But that's how bad I was. I couldn't even just stop for a couple weeks, man, to take a drug test. I know what that feels like, guys, It was like, dude, you look back on that now, it's like, bro, just give it a couple weeks and then you can go back to living the life you want to live. But I couldn't even do that. I remember the night before the drug test, knowing I would embarrass my dad. Man, if I would have went and took that test, and my dad, who put in for me to get the job, right? And I'm painting this picture, guys, because how much evil was inside of me, how much disrespect was inside of me, right? And it's very, very important for this story, because I know what all this feels like. All the things I talk about today, guys, I talk about them because this is who I am at my core, right? This is who the enemy believed that, or made me believe I was. I passed that drug test. Always been a hard worker. Remember, guys, sports, performance, progress. I'm game, dude. Put me somewhere where I can get results. Let's do it. I'll do it. And, I came in at a low-grade paying job in that factory, and, I worked my butt off. I never missed work. I worked overtime. I worked super hard. And I went from a C-paying job to a B-paying job to an A-paying job to a manager. And this entire time, drugs were still my God. So the only difference from 17 to 18, 19, 20 is at 17, I was broke. And I did a bunch of drugs, as many as I could. At 18, I lived at home, and I actually made pretty good money. Had no bills. My parents I didn't have to pay rent or anything like that. So essentially, I could just work and spend every bit of my money at the dealer's house, man. Every bit. I remember many nights, I would get paid. I would work second shift. I would go hang out literally in the straight ghetto. I was the only white person there, and this is not a racial thing. I'm just painting the picture here. Be there all night till the next day, till I had to go to work, and I literally sometimes would blow an entire paycheck in a night. I never missed work, though. Always showed up, always presented myself, always lied really, really well. And this went on for years, man. And this is when I really found out what true hell was. What really living in hell is living a double life. And people do this to varying degrees, guys, right? My degree was, man, Trey dropped out of high school. Everybody knew I was partier. I raced motocross. I just come from that culture, that. I smoked cigarettes. That's just kind of who I was. I was my identity. But now all these people are like, man, Trey literally dropped out of high school, and now he's progressive in a career, he's doing good. And, so everybody on the outside, including the people I worked with, thought I was a good dude, right? And I remember vividly, guys, having 8 balls of cocaine in my pocket walking around that factory. I remember popping Adderall and smoking joints in the parking lot, and then going in the bathroom to do a rail, and then going out and acting like I'm some leader. I was really good at lying, man. Really good. To the point, Brandon McDowell is my best friend. He worked with me there, and he had no idea. No idea, right? I was like that at work, in meetings, all the time, man. Straight double life, right? So as all these people start seeing Trey, it's yo, Trey's doing good. Dude, behind closed doors, I knew, I couldn't even look myself in the mirror, guys. Could not even look myself in the eyes because of this. So if you're somebody listening today and you're in that double life, I'm telling you, I'm going to show you, guys, where that leads to. We're going to fast forward to when I found fitness, my next God. Here was my next God that I started serving. I'm still atheist to this point. A couple guys at work started a weight loss challenge. And once again, very competitive. I am very, very competitive. My toxic trait literally is if somebody doubts me, I will make my success burn your eyeballs out as you watch me succeed. That's inside of me. So in this weight loss goal, or this weight loss challenge, I was the only one that stuck through. I lost 60 pounds, and this is how I lost weight. I ate about 800 to 1,000 calories a day. I ran on a treadmill every single day, and I smoked a cigarette on the way home from the gym. And that was my transition to get off drugs. Because then I found fitness, and man, when I would go run for an hour on the treadmill, I would get a high. Just full transparency, I was like, I'm high again. This is cool. But I'm not like spending all this money. I'm not like, feel like I'm destroying myself. So then that became my new God. And I became addicted to fitness. To the point fitness changed my life so much, so radically, got me off drugs, helped me be a person of integrity, helped me start showing up for myself. I was like, yo, I just got to figure out a way to help other people do this. I don't know what I got to do, but this experience that I had through fitness, I want to give to other people. So then as I'm working my full-time job, I started getting my personal trainer certification. Hey, and in this time, I was telling people I was going to start my own gym one day. Every single person doubted me. Everybody, except my dad. Everybody else was like, you can't build a gym in your town. They told me personal trainer's a college person's job. Go get a real job. All these negative voices. But keep in mind, deep down, I love when people talk crap to me. Deep down, I love when people doubt me. I love it. I'm just like, okay, cool. Give me more. It's fuel to the fire. Give me more. Right? So as I'm working this full-time job, I'm getting my personal trainer certification. I get certified, and then I start working out of a gym in the town I was working in. So I would work a 12-hour shift. I would then go train a couple clients at the gym. Then I would go work out. I would drive home, and I did this over and over and over and over again. I remember many nights driving home, man, leaving these workouts, 10 o'clock at night, I had to be up at 4 a.m. the next day to work another 12, 14-hour day. I'd be like, you should just quit, Trey. You should just quit. There's no way this is going to work out. There's no way, right? I would go home, I would eat, I would go to bed, and I'd just get up and do it again. And this part of the story is very important because people see the success I have now, and people want the success without the story. Something that aggravates me and burns in my soul is when people say things like, must be nice. Must be nice. It is nice. It was very nice as well with all that self-doubt that nobody was there with me, right? All the risks that I put myself through. And I have a lot of that to thank for being an addict. Because when you ride around in your car with drugs all the time, guess what? You're really good at taking risks. I think about like business decisions now and stuff. It's like, that's nothing, dude. I used to literally ride around with stuff that would lock me up in prison for a long time. Blessing and a curse. I finally make enough money, guys, to pay my bills. So I'm working a full-time job, personal trainer, and I was making enough money. I was like, when I can make enough money to pay my bills and my personal training stuff, I'm going to quit my full-time job. And I'm going to take out my entire 401k and I'm going to start a gym. And everybody was like, that's a terrible idea. You're stealing away from your retirement. And I'm just like, dude, the last thing I want to be is old and fragile and have a bunch of money. No, thank you. I'm good. No. And if anybody's telling you that in life, guys, I would run as far away as you can. I quit my full-time job. I said, you know what? If I put 40 plus hours a week into my personal training, there's no way I can't be successful. And that was the start of it all. Started training clients out of my garage. Then I moved to another shop. Then I moved to another building, and it slowly built and slowly built. And here I was out on this island just by myself, personal training people to the point where I used to train clients one-on-one for 12 hours every single day. Every day I was slam-packed, right, in an old mill in my hometown, right? I became the man in my community for health and fitness, right? Worked with tons of mentors all over the world, invested in mentors just like I do today. And at that point, I started coaching Brandon McDowell, who is my best friend. He actually worked at Kennemetal with me. So I started coaching him, helped him coach him in powerlifting, helped him lose weight. And then he came to me one day, he's like, man, I really want to do what you're doing, right? And he was able to quit his full-time job, come work for me. And, we built that company, or I built that company to well over 6 figures. And then I was able to hire him and come in and That was the first business. And this is where things really start taking a turn. I want to still paint this picture of up until this point, I'm still atheist. I'm not serving sports anymore. I'm not worshiping sports anymore, but I am worshiping fitness. I'm not worshiping drugs anymore, but I'm worshiping fitness. And now, not only do I have fitness as a God, but I have business and success. I remember the first time I made $13,000 in 1 month by myself with no employees. I was like, it was another high. I was like, whoa, this is freaking awesome. And then I got really empty after that. The next month, I did like $11,000 in that month as just a personal trainer by myself, and I felt empty. I was like, none of this even matters. Screw all this, because I got so addicted to making money and making progress, right, that I forgot about the people. So that was my next God, was success. And I'm sharing this with you guys because my identity, my entire life, right, I was always worshiping some God, always. Like my entire life, I was always worshiping some God, but that God was not Jesus. That God was not God. It was not God the Father. And I share this with you guys because at some point, all these gods that you worship and you think gives you happiness and peace will die at some point. And it might last a long time. It might. But at some point, your identity must shift to something eternal, right? Hence, kingdom first. So at this point in time, business is going good. Brandon's training all the clients. We're building the business. We're scaling it. And my brother, who was my best friend my entire life, was killed. We don't really know how. We can take some guesses. And the last conversation me and my brother had was not a good conversation. Things that I would not repeat out loud today, to this day still. And when you're best friends with somebody like, me and my brother, we pissed in the same bed together. Like, we were ride or die inseparable, until we got to adults. Like, I'm so glad that God blessed me with somebody to spend a lot of my life with like that. But when he was killed, and I got that phone call, the only way I can explain this, guys, is it was like my absolute soul left my body and I was a carcass of myself. And anybody that listens to this that was at my brother's funeral saw me, and I was absolutely empty. Absolutely empty. You could have put a gun in my mouth at any moment and I would have pulled the trigger. Gladly, actually. Gladly. Like, I didn't care about any of this stuff. I didn't care about my business. I didn't care about the people that I was impacting. I didn't care about all the blessings in my life. At this point, I had a Range Rover in the garage, a nice truck, a beautiful home, a sports bike in the garage, business. I was the local man training all the high school athletes. We were putting on like promo videos at the school. I mean, like, from the outside looking in, you're like, wow, you freaking figured it out, man. You figured it out. And then behind all this, dude, if somebody, I would have literally paid somebody to put a gun in my mouth. Paid somebody. Because I was so empty, because everything I worshiped at until this point in my life was now gone. I had achieved everything that the world tells you is of success. Everything. Right? And to be that empty and have all those blessings in your life, you realize that there's a God-sized hole in you that you can only fill with one thing. There wasn't enough money in my bank account, even though it was great at the time. There wasn't a cool enough car. There wasn't a cool enough house. There wasn't enough impact in my life. I need to really paint this picture. I'm talking hundreds of people we have impacted, hundreds of transformations. We're like the local go-to gym. And I'm the face of that. And I'm ready to end my life every single waking moment. Because I did not have a God. I didn't have an identity. And this is when everything in my life broke, man, everything. And it took a long time for that to happen. I was 26 years old, 25 or 26. I'm terrible with dates. And I actually went to take my own life. There's some photos that go around the internet. I was at a pond, and that's where I went to drown myself. And I'm going to tell you guys why I went to drown myself, because that was my biggest fear. And I was like, you know what, dude, if you're going to go out, you might as well torture yourself. I share that with you guys because that's how dark I was, right? Like, you guys hear me speak now about light and darkness and exposing things. I know what it feels like to be in the pits of hell. I lived there. I entertained those thoughts. I sat there fantasizing about it. I sat by this pond and I just left spending time with my mom. I sat by this pond. It was in Salisbury, North Carolina, and I had a book. I didn't have a Bible. I locked everything in my truck, phone, key, everything. Like this was the day. It's like I'm just checking out. Nobody knows. But I took a book with me, Mere Christianity, and I was just flipping through the pages. I didn't like have a Christian belief, but I was like, there's got to be something, man, that can help me. And, I'm sitting there and I'm just looking at the pond. I'm flipping through the pages of this book, and there was an absolute divine intervention and a divine interruption in my life. And I can only explain this from a spiritual standpoint. There was a flashcards. It was right in front of my eyes of every single detailed face I've ever impacted in my entire life. Every single high school athlete that I've been a part of leading, every single adult that I've gotten to transform, every single youth baseball player that I've coached, every single youth basketball player that I've coached, my family, my friends, it was so rapid, and it was like every card was a second. But I could remember the details of every individual's face. And it seemed like it went on for like a half an hour. I don't know how long it was. It was like I was lost in time and space. And I remember at the end of this, it was just like, these are all the people you're going to leave questioning you. These are all the people that's going to think this is their fault, And by the grace of God, I walked away that day, and I was like, all right, I need help. Like, I just need help. It's finally when I admitted I need help, I stopped, trying to hide. During this time, Brandon, shout out to him, man. He forced himself to come to my house, because I'm going to describe to you guys what real depression is. This is after I lost my brother. I forgot a piece of this. I did not bathe. I literally stopped taking showers, during this period in my life. I wouldn't reach out to anybody. And I had all these people in my community that I had led in this world, coming by my house trying to give me stuff. And the way that I explained this to people, it was like I wanted to hug everybody in the world, but I also didn't want them to know I existed. And it was like I was in this middle ground of absolute hell, right? Of I just wanted to tell somebody how bad I was struggling, but I couldn't, People could obviously see it. People were concerned. That's why people were coming to the house. But I didn't take a shower for 2 weeks, man. 2 weeks, So when I say I understand people, you guys see the success now, you hear the things I talk about, nobody wants to walk through that, man. When I left the pond that day, I was like, I just got to figure something out. So I found a therapist, and it was like a telehealth therapist. And, this big burly guy popped up on the screen, man. And he's like, hey, you know what? I know your religious beliefs, because I had to answer questions to fill out the application. And he's obviously looking at a shell of a man, He's like, I know your beliefs, man. He's like, I can't do nothing for you. This is exactly how he starts the Zoom call. He's like, I can't do anything for you, but I know somebody who can. And he said, Jesus Christ saved my life. As soon as this man said that, I said, in the back of my head, I'm like, here we effing go with another stupid Jesus story. That was exactly my first thought in the back of my head. I'm like, here we go again. I almost hung the Zoom up. But he just kept talking. There was no pause in him. He's like, I lived a double life for 27 years. I was a business owner, and I overdosed 7 times and have been Narcan back to life 7 times. He went right into his testimony. And in the back of my head, I was like, yo, I ain't done nothing nearly that bad. If Jesus can do something for somebody like you, maybe he can help me, right? I was judging him, right? But he had been to such a dark place, 20 plus years of a double life. I couldn't imagine that. He actually overdosed 7 times. By the grace of God, I never fully overdosed, thank God, right? So I see somebody who's been in more darkness than me, and then Jesus saved him. I'm like, surely he can do something for me. All of a sudden, my eyes light up, my heart opens up. I'm just listening. He's like, I need you to do 3 things for me. Can you do 3 things for me? I'm like, uh-huh. Now keep in mind, 5 minutes ago, I was about to hang the call up. Now I'm like, uh-huh, sure can, right? He said, I need you to get a Bible. I need you to listen to worship music, and I need you to go find a church. Will you do that for me? I was like, uh-huh. I got off that Zoom call. My client and friend at the time, Lexi Smith, I didn't even know how to buy a Bible, guys. Keep in mind, I've been atheist my whole life. I reached out to her. I said, hey, I need help getting a Bible. Her dad is a pastor who is a pivotal part of my journey. And she bought me my first Bible. I reached out to Brandon. I was like, hey, dude, can I go to church with you guys? And he's like, that's crazy. Yeah, of course you can go to church with us, And I made myself listen to worship music. I didn't give myself an option. right? I took all the discipline I had learned from business, fitness, and sports, and I was like, these are the 3 things I got to do. I'm going to do them, and I'm not going to miss. In that time as well, I was taking antidepressants and Vyvanse 70 milligrams because a psychiatrist at that time told me I had PTSD, which is absolute bullcrap. You just walk through a tragedy. You don't diagnose. You're going through a hard time. And I remember throughout this time, there was this voice telling me that you don't need those medications. Like as I was working on my relationship with God, and I trashed them all, and I quit cold turkey. You guys hear me talk now about depression medication, ADHD medication. I don't just say that from an ivory tower. I live that. And they do 100% block the voice of God. You running to that for your weakness instead of God is a problem, and that's not medical advice. That is spiritual advice from somebody who lived it, not from somebody who sits around and doesn't know what that feels like. I go to church with Brandon. Pastor Bobby is preaching. He tells his testimony. He was a full-blown alcoholic, right? God intertwined in his life through his son. And there was all these stories after that, guys, of God putting these people in front of me, of all these broken men and how God used them. And I was like, wow, so like this God thing that I thought my whole life was like all these people who don't live it, I just saw the wrong thing. I didn't know God, right? Because from that point forward, God kept showing me the next person, the next broken man that was now preaching the gospel, the next broken man, and I'm just like, oh my God, these are my people. These are my people, man. And that was the thing that like turned my spirit over. Now, keep in mind, throughout this time, guys, I want to really tell you guys how much disbelief I had in my life, okay? I remember I had a home office at my house years ago. I remember in the middle of the day, because Brandon's keeping the business going, keep in mind, because I was like, I can't do any of this. I'm checked out, right? And I remember worship music playing in my office. And I was on my hands and knees, literally like yelling and crying out, saying, this is not going to work. This is a joke. I literally would verbalize and say, God's not real. But I had no other option. Because my entire life, I disbelieved in this character, in this story, right? And now I'm just like, I got to go all in. There's a really important piece to this story, guys. God does not hit you on the head with a magic wand, okay? When that happened and that testimony was presented in front of me, God did not tap me with a magic wand and my life was changed. I partnered with God and took the steps necessary to pour back and build that relationship with him, right? Reading the Bible, listening to worship music, going to church as much as I didn't want to, right? That was where my entire life changed and I actually had a new identity, right? And since then, I've been following Christ since that point. There's some sneaky little idols of identity that sneak into your life throughout this point, though, guys. Right? So we just walked from a kid all the way to 26 years old who worshiped and had an identity first of shame. Sports saved him from that shame temporarily. Drugs, partying, and women were the next God in my life, right? Kept going with drugs, partying, and women. Then it was success, making money, and fitness. It was fitness first, then success, right? Then every ounce of that came crashing down. And guys, take it from me. There's not a single amount of money you can have in your bank account. There's not a single amount of impact you can have in this world. There's nothing that will override that big empty hole in your heart. Nothing. Not a single thing. To the point now where I share with people all the time, this is why I don't care if people like me. I don't. I could care less if anybody listening to this podcast likes me in the slightest degree. I care about one person's opinion, and that's the opinion of God, because God was the one with me there throughout all this, right? Truthfully. And I am put on this earth to serve him and serve him only. I'm not put on this earth to please you and make you feel good, right? And when you start to realize that journey and who is actually there with you, that is actually what gives you a lot of power in your relationship with Christ. At this time, guys, I owned a gym, and when we were moving into our third location, I made a video. You can scroll back far enough on my Instagram and see this video. It's a video of Trey, keep in mind, punk rock culture, smoking cigarettes, partying, doing all the things, motocross, motorcycles. That was my vibe, right? That still is a vibe of mine, not with all the illegal stuff, right? There's a video on my Instagram, and I made a video. I said, hey guys, God came to me and told me our next gym is going to be centered around him. We're moving into a new location. And our core values will be faith, family, fitness, and we're no longer going to operate like we operate. And I lost almost half my membership. We moved into this new facility. Number one, I couldn't afford to pay the bills as it was. I just couldn't pass up the opportunity. And then we lost like half our membership because we switched from a worldly gym to everything was Christ-centered. But as God does, when you're obedient to him, he shows up. Me and Brandon ended up 3X in this business. I don't mind sharing, I think our highest month there in this small town was like $40,000 in a month. I share those numbers with you guys because I went from not being able to pay the bills because of following my values, right, of following Christ, to then if you would have asked anybody in that community that a gym would do that in 30 days, they would say, there is no way. We used to have people outside, literally, we would have people outside, the roads were flooded, you could barely walk in and out of the doors. So it went from not being able to pay, not being able to afford the rent, losing half our memberships, so I'm just got to be obedient, man. And this isn't some prosperity gospel, because don't get it twisted, there was many sleepless nights. Don't get it twisted, there was many nights of me trying to figure things out, right? But that's what it looks like to serve God over the world, right? Man, fast forward to this day in my life, guys. I've been preaching on Savage Sunday every Sunday at 11 a.m. for, 2 years now, right? I started Bible studies at my gym. I now run a global coaching company that is centered around Jesus Christ. I am haunted every day by just wanting to share Jesus in the Word. And this past Saturday I officially finally announced that I'm being called into full-time ministry. And people hear that and they're like, well, what does that mean? I have a thriving coaching company right now, thriving. We help humans all over the world get their bodies back in alignment, reclaim their identity, and get in the best shape ever. And we actually got a live Zoom call coming up and soon that I got to make sure I'm not late for, right? And then this comes in my life, full-time ministry. All that means in my life now, guys, is more truth, more gospel. That is the reason this podcast was born, right? My beautiful, amazing sister in Christ and client, one-on-one client as well. We just got apparel ordered today. We have a baptism event coming up in a couple weeks. It's just overflowing. It's overflowing. I share this with you guys because, man, take it from somebody who did not have an identity their entire life and who now does. And people see my success now, you can take all this away from me. I will go on the streets tomorrow and preach the gospel, right? Because when you seek first the kingdom of heaven, what does Jesus tell us? You're good. And that is what kingdom first is all about. Kingdom first simplifies your life, guys. You know what that means? Money will never come into play over the things I'm supposed to do. Business will never override the things that God's calling me to do. Relationships will never override what God's calling me to do. Apply it to everything, right? Kingdom first means it's non-negotiable. There's no negotiations with what comes first in your life. It's not your girlfriend, your wife, your kids, your sports, your business. No. The kingdom comes first. And that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people in your current walk in your life. But I promise you, as you continuously follow Christ, he's going to demand and ask more of you. He's going to demand and ask for more sacrifice. And your life should continuously change throughout that process. Also want this to be a message to everybody. If God can use me, what can he do with you? Guys, not only was I atheist, I literally would negatively talk about Christianity openly. The people that would come up and try to share the gospel, I would essentially shun them, me and my brother, right? Because we thought it was that big of a joke. That big of a joke. And now fast forward to today, right? I literally get to talk about Jesus every single day of my life. I have a mentorship, a spiritual mentorship where I help people go really, really deep on their relationship with Jesus. 3 days ago, I was called into full-time ministry. Kingdom First Ministries now exist. We're working on things actively. I don't know where it goes. I don't know. I don't need to know. I just need to make sure that the message continuously gets out, guys, because at the core of Trey, my heart burns, man, burns for the lost Christians out there, burns for the people who call themselves Christians and you're not even close to living a value out. Burns, my heart aches for the people that think you said some salvation's prayer and you're walking into heaven, because it doesn't work like that. My heart breaks for the people who do not hear the true gospel. It's not pretty. It's not the play, it's not the manger play that you grew up watching in church. My heart aches for the people who aren't putting the kingdom first in their life, but they're proclaiming Christianity, because your identity is lost. You get more excited or upset over money. You get more excited or upset about the way you look. You get more excited or upset about your partner. You get more excited or upset about your next business deal than you do missing reading your Bible. My heart breaks for the Christians that I speak to that don't even read their Bible every day. Yo, guys, if you listen to this podcast, let's just make it very clear. It's a non-negotiable to never not read your Bible again. And if anybody is making that like, it's not okay. Every single person here is listening to a podcast. Every single person here is scrolling on social media. Every single person here looks at your phone about 500 times a day. And you mean to tell me you got an excuse for why you can't read your word of God? Yo, to anybody that hears this, make today the day you plant your flag in the ground and you never miss that again. And I mean never. Bearing you're in the hospital sick and dying, you download the Bible app on your phone and you read the verse of the day. It takes 15 seconds. I'm not saying you got to read a chapter. I'm not saying you got to be a Bible scholar, but I'm saying you have to have some non-negotiables in your life. Yo, and throughout this podcast, guys, we're also going to talk about how we balance ambition and identity. Because one of the hardest things to do is be progressive in your business and in your life without that identity being taken again. It's a hard battle. Here's the easiest way to tell what you serve, guys. Easiest way. You guys ready? What do you run to? Do you run to prayer, scripture, fasting? Or do you run to exercise? Or do you run to drugs? Or do you run to your partner? Or do you run to more success? Because that'll tell you what you worship. Real quick like. And it really hurts when that's exposed. Does not feel good. You have one identity. And that is you are a child of God. And I promise you guys, when you put the kingdom first, you really can forget about everything else. Yo, you think that scripture's lying? You think Jesus is lying to you guys? Where he says, seek first the kingdom of heaven and all things shall be added to you? You might not think that as we're having this conversation, but a lot of your actions show that. A lot of your fear, anxiety, negativity, doubt, and worry show that in your life. We talk about alignment a lot. There's a lot of people listening right now that work a job they hate. There's a lot of people listening right now that only get up in the morning to go to work for money. There's a lot of people listening right now that don't think they worship money, but guess what? It's the only thing you get up in the morning for. Shows what your God is. Where do you give your first fruits? I don't ask you guys these questions to shame or condemn you, but I hope it stirs something up inside of you. I hope and I pray that when you hear those questions, if they cut deep, you actually change. Because never forget this. Obedience that does not cost anything is not obedience. It's not. Faith that does not cost you anything is not faith. Are you willing to adopt the full identity of a follower of Christ? Because when you do that, a lot of people get this mixed up. Following Christ is more about your death and his life than it is about you. Death to yourself, death to your desires, death to your pleasures, death to your wants, so you can experience the true abundant life of eternity, so you can experience the Spirit overflowing through you. That is the real walk of a Christian. It's not posting scriptures in your Instagram. It's not posting your Bible verses. It's not waving your hands in worship. There's a lot of you guys watching this right now that will listen to this. You go to church every Sunday. You throw your hands up. You open your Bible a couple times a week. But deep down, you're empty. Deep down, you don't even know if you truly believe this Jesus thing. But you can't even be open and public about it because you have so much fear. And that's simply because your life's out of alignment, not because you're bad, not because Jesus went anywhere, but because your identity is out of alignment. And that will be the cornerstone of everything we talk about. Because if your identity is off, everything else in your life will be off always. If your identity is in alignment, your life will be in alignment. All that said, all love as always. We'll get this podcast posted.